Hello and welcome to Creating Hope in Our Community, Healthy and Happy in Camglen Radio's campaign for promoting good wellbeing and ultimately suicide prevention. Today I'm speaking with Lindsey Williamson, Director of the Hive and Love and Harmony in Kirkcaldy. I'll be speaking to Lindsey about the unique mental health challenges that LGBTQ+ people face and how organisations like Love and Harmony support them. First of all, Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks very much for having me.
Not at all. Absolutely, very very happy to have you along today. So first things first, can you tell us about the Hive?
Yeah, absolutely. The Hive is an LGBTQIA community hub based in Kirkcaldy in Fife. We've got an abundance of space, thankfully. We've got 10,000 square feet over 2 floors. Originally, it was opened back in September 2021 to create a safe and affirmative place for our community to kind of be. And I took over in April 2022 under Love and Harmony, and we've just gone from strength to strength. So we really deal with a lot of the kind of social and economical issues that are faced by the LGBTQIA community. I myself am a qualified therapist and offer free one-to-one therapy sessions. So people can come in, get 12 weeks therapy, free of charge. We've got a personal trainer in our own gym in the facility. So I think it's important to emphasise that it's not just mental health, it's physical health as well. And really we just want to remove the barriers that people find kind of accessing services that are really important.
So you mentioned barriers that the LGBTQIA plus people might face. Do you think you can maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. There's a far lower level of trust within our community to access things through mainstream avenues, and having a suitable place where people feel safe and, very affirmed by people who are either part of the community or allies of the community just means that they're more comfortable maybe speaking to somebody that we have from Citizens Advice, for example, making an introduction to Cozy Kingdom so they can get help with their heating costs, helping with things like housing forms and benefit forms, and just really chatting through a lot of the kind of social and economic issues that they face. I think it's difficult because our community is far more likely to suffer from mental health issues. Now, that's not to say that being part of LGBTQIA itself means that you have them. But when we're facing, struggles in housing, in employment, if we're not affirmed by our families, there's so many different areas where it can be difficult to be your authentic self and to be accepted as your authentic self, that it can actually mean that you're struggling with basic things that other people may take for granted.
And wait, so where does that lack of trust in services come from, would you say?
I think people have, and I'm certainly not stereotyping here and saying that services aren't equipped, but historically there has been discrimination. People going in and feeling as though they may be judged for being part of the community, having bad experiences elsewhere may make them more reluctant to go into places and actually, talk about the fact that, they're maybe struggling with a neighbour in their housing because of their sexuality, and how they identify. And I think it's just removing those barriers that we want to encourage the allies to be part of the Hive as well, to kind of close the gap between the communities, and really just bring people together.
Great. So I guess that brings me on to my next question then. It certainly seems as though you have cultivated a strong sense of community and even before we hit the record button, we talked about the value of peer support. So clearly, LGBTQ plus people aren't a monolith, and it's a very broad church of individuals. But how important would you say is that sense of community?
Massive. I mean, it's been studied and proven that when people feel affirmed as who they are, they have a far better mental health outlook. It's all about community. We've got 20 local people, not all LGBTQIA, who sit on our board, and that is massive because we want to make sure that the people who are coming into the hive and the local people are at the forefront of what we do. If you can feel as though you've got a place to go, a place to feel safe, a place to feel welcomed where you can be your authentic self, it has a massive impact on your mental health. The local community plays a massive part, and for the most part, we've been incredibly well supported. Our local council have been fantastic with the hive. They've just approved us for a stair lift as well, so that we can make the upper level more accessible for those with mobility issues. So yeah, the local people can really play a huge part. And I think not just in and around the hive, but the fact that they know that we're there with Fife Pride taking place in Kirkcaldy. You'll see people coming out of their houses, coming out of local shops to kind of support everybody in the march. And it's lovely to see, and it really gives that sense of community and safety as well, because that's something that a lot of the youths that come into the hive express to me, that they are scared. They're scared of, hate crime. People just not accepting them. A lot of our youths have not been at school for a period of time. And all of that, although we've made massive inroads in getting the rights of LGBTQIA people out there, we still have a way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that, that I've been very aware of in the last couple of years, and it's maybe not so at least I'm not aware of it being prevalent in the news now, is, for example, how trans people have been treated in the media, and, the trans debate never seems to involve trans people in the conversations on TV. I mean, I guess it's fair to say that certain parts of the community are maybe more... Well, is that fair to say certain parts of the community are more discriminated against than others at this stage? Or
I would say that certainly from experience, from what I've seen and witnessed, the transgender community are more discriminated against. I think that we have come a long way in terms of lesbian, gay and bisexual. However, with the transgender community, it is one of the fastest growing communities in the world, but there's still such a stigma around it. People saying things and getting pronouns wrong, not respecting pronouns. Again, from experience, I've got people that are coming in that say their pronouns aren't even respected in their own home. To face that kind of adversity in your life every single day, and somebody said to me that someone made a comment to them and said, well, why do you want to be a man? And they said, it's not that I want to be a man, I am a man. And these are the things that people are not understanding. The challenges that people face being transgender. We're if you're born cis male or female, you have everything that a transgender person desires, and has the right to have. You don't have to worry about taking hormones. You don't have to worry about the fight that you face every day and just trying to be who you are. My nephew's transgender, and that's one of the main reasons I got involved with the hive initially as a volunteer, was to try and get him to come along more. And I've seen what he faced at school. I've seen what he faced in the classroom. I've seen what he faced in society. And it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Bullies at school or kids that don't understand, have a lack of education around it. Nobody is brought into this world with an opinion. It's learned behaviour. And I think education is massive. We need to start teaching people younger that it is absolutely paramount that we accept people for being their authentic self. It's harrowing, some of the stories that I've heard. And I won't name names, but a youth being held down in school toilets and the slur tranny written on their arm, and what that does psychologically to somebody, not just at that point in time, but for the rest of their life. And then people wonder why they're scared to go to different organisations, and that follows you. So when we're talking about, housing, when we're talking about police, when we're talking about these different organisations, that memory that they have in their mind of being not accepted by a peer makes them far more reluctant to show trust in these places that they're going to be treated the way they should be.
You don't have to look very far in social media to find something that's, in my opinion, absolutely, a really disgusting opinion about trans people. You don't, it's, you're never more than 2 clicks away, in my view, from something like that.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we can't escape it now. And, we talk about kind of the internet. It's a wonderful thing. Of course it is, for many reasons.
I wouldn't have found out about the Hive if it wasn't for the
There
internet.
you go. So it can be fantastic, and there's a lot of amazing support out there for people from all different walks of life that they can access at the click of a button, which is amazing. But the darker side of that is that there is no escape. When I was younger, I was born in 1982, and when I went to school, if anybody said anything, it stopped when I got home. This doesn't stop. This is a 24/7 barrage of abuse for some people, and it's not just online bullying or cyberbullying. It's also what they see, unhealthy depictions of what they should aspire to be, opinions, even if they don't think it's having an effect on them. Like you say, you're only ever a couple of clicks away from some heinous comments that really would have an adverse effect on somebody. And, there's people that come into the Hive that are too scared to come out at the moment. They're too scared because they see these comments online and they think, well, what if that's what my brother will think of me, or what if that's what my best pal will say? What if that's what if I'm letting my mum down and they'll disown me? Nobody should ever feel like that. Everybody should have a place in this world to be safe and to be themselves. And that's really what we are trying to establish at the Hive. And along with a lot of amazing community partners as well, who have been fantastic, is to really not only allow people to feel safe and welcome, but also to be a voice for them when they can't be a voice for themselves.
So there's some element of advocacy work.
Absolutely. So a lot of the time we'll make what we call kind of soft introductions to other organisations. We'll speak to people on somebody's behalf first and foremost to make sure that, they maybe don't have to explain things that they're not comfortable with. And make sure that they're going to get the right kind of treatment, and that we match them up with somebody who is, understanding and empathic as to what they're going through. So yeah, there's advocacy as well. I used to work in the local council office, and through that we've had contacts, and we've got citizens' advice that come in. Like I said, and the woman that comes in from there is absolutely fantastic. It just means that it gives people an opportunity to get the support and the advice that they need in a safe place where they feel comfortable. It's almost like when people talk about your home, and that's your safe haven, and you'll feel more comfortable if somebody comes to your place. And I think that's kind of the same as what the Hive's trying to adapt, that if we can create a place where we can welcome other people in, and people have the opportunity to discuss things that they need to, where they feel comfortable, it kind of removes that barrier again of going into a strange place and having to face the unknown.
From what you're saying, I imagine there's a lot of people who would see the Hive as home, as a place that they can just be themselves without any questions being asked. And when I was really hoping to speak to an organisation like the Hive that supports people who would fall under the LGBTQIA plus umbrella. I couldn't find as many grassroots organisations like yourselves. So I guess, with being that very community focused, is it very locally focused, would you say, or can people come from across the country?
People can come from absolutely anywhere. The majority of the people that we see are from across Fife, but not just Kirkcaldy, Dunfermline, Glenrothes, Cooper, Lochgelly, Leven. So it's really across the whole of Fife. And then at times like Pride, for example. Last year we had Claire Sweeney up, and she was absolutely fantastic. She attracted quite a few people as well. We've got a new ambassador for the Hive who is brilliant at getting people to come across from likes of Edinburgh. And I think that's something that we're trying to establish is rather than just Fife-wide, we're trying to be well known in Scotland across the board because, you know, we are the largest LGBTQIA community hub in Scotland, if not in the UK. And we want to make sure that we are continuing to grow, to provide services that are sorely needed in the community. And it is for everybody. It's not just for the LGBTQIA community. We do insist that you have to be an ally, you have to be respectful. We encourage gender neutral language when people are in the Hive. And for the most part, we've found everybody to really enjoy it. We do a lot of social events. So we had a quiz just a few weeks ago. And I think there was probably a 70-30 split between the straight community and the LGBTQ community. And it was an absolutely fantastic night where everybody just laughed. We had our licence in, so people were having a couple of drinks. You know, we had good prizes. And everybody felt as though we were really as one. And I think I took a moment just to kind of look around and really appreciate the space that we've created. And we're incredibly proud of it. You know, Pink Saltire were massive in that. They were a charity that actually originally opened the Hive, and it was a gentleman called Stuart that brought me in, and eventually I took over from him, so he has to have a lot of the credit for it as well because it was originally his idea. But myself and Jenna and the rest of the team have taken it to another level, and we're absolutely delighted with the way it's going.
You've been quite keen to point out that straight people and cisgender people and allies in general are very much welcome. And I was wondering, that sounds like it would be very valuable to other people who are there, to LGBTQIA plus people that are there. I mean, is it?
Yeah, it's fantastic because you actually see a lot of conversations happening that need to happen. You know, it's a safe space where, within reason, allies can be educated as well. You know, we have a group for the family and friends of transgender people and how we can, educate them in supporting their loved one. And that's been, really powerful because education is what's required. You know, we have people from all different generations coming in for cups of tea and coffee and a cake and all that, and they want to learn. The majority of people need to learn and need to know about this. And what I would say in terms of that is that I'm part of the LGBTQ community as well, and we need to allow for that education to happen. People need an opportunity to learn about pronouns and about the correct language to use, about how to support people. And I think that obviously there is a gulf when you're looking back 3-4 generations. And a lot of the time it's not a fact that they're being ignorant or they're being rude. It's a fact that they don't understand. So the Hive being open to everybody really gives an opportunity for these conversations to take place in a safe place where we can make sure that it's kind of controlled and everybody's feeling comfortable with it. So yeah, I think that only adds to the benefits for everybody really. And we've got a lot of other things that are open to everyone. We've got a community fridge and pantry, so we are tackling things like the cost of living crisis, social isolation, the winter fuel has been a big one for us. We're a warm space through winter. So again, Fife Council were brilliant and funded us the last 3 years to provide hot food and drinks to anybody that comes into the Hive from kind of December to the end of February. So we are seeing a lot of people coming in, a lot of the straight community, as well as the LGBTQIA community.
It's very heartening to know that there are so many people who are coming in who maybe, find it very hard to keep up with the. I mean, it's not like really change that's happened. I don't think, because I'm a trans person it's not a new idea. You know, it goes back hundreds of years, but it seems like the conversation has shifted and maybe been more inclusive in the last 10 years, and people are more aware of pronouns. Whether or not they choose to respect them, I suppose, might be a different thing, but people are having these conversations more, and that must be very heartening to see people who don't see themselves as LGBTQIA plus, but want to learn.
Absolutely. And I think that's the main thing, is want to learn. You know, are coming in and they are trying to use pronouns. We do encourage our volunteers to wear pronoun badges, to raise that kind of awareness. So yeah, I think that we've got so many people that have said, I've learned so much. And because, you know, particularly the transgender community is so fast growing, you don't really meet anybody that doesn't know somebody who is impacted. And when I say impacted, I mean has a family member or a friend who identifies as transgender. So it's so important that this message gets out there that, you know, we need to learn, we need to educate ourselves. There's no room for ignorance. And as long as you're trying to learn, mistakes will happen. Pronouns will, unfortunately, people will be misgendered on occasion. And as upsetting as that is for people, every single person who's transgender that comes into the hive has said to me, I don't mind if somebody gets it wrong, I'll correct them, and as long as they then correct themselves. And I think that's what it's about. It's about just saying, I apologise, and then correcting yourself.
Yeah, and I suppose being open-minded enough to accept that and to correct yourself.
Yeah.
Going forward.
And it is about being open-minded. We had a woman that was maybe in her late 70s come in just a couple of weeks ago, and she was having a cup of tea and she was chatting away to me, and her way was saying, you know, I've always wanted to come in here because it looks so welcoming, but because I'm not gay, am I allowed in? I said, of course you are. And she was the sweetest woman. She put a donation in. She said, you know, my grandson, he's gay, and I just want to make sure that he knows that I'm supporting him. And that's it. By utilising these spaces and by educating yourselves, you are supporting each and every person in the LGBTQIA plus community.
So that's really heartening. You know, like I find my eyes are welling up a little bit. That wee story,
it was lovely.
Yeah,
it was lovely.
It's really nice. And I mean, it shouldn't really take for you to have a family member who is LGBTQIA. I'm not saying that's who this woman is.
Definitely not.
I guess for some people that's the learning curve.
But that was potentially one of her first interactions with somebody so close.
Mm-hmm.
And she's then making sure that she's educating herself, and she was chatting to the volunteers, she was talking to other people that were just kind of sitting having a cup of tea. She was saying, this is a lovely space that you've got, and just a conversation, you know, and it's so heartwarming to see that these conversations that have been needed to be happening for years are now happening. It's exactly the same with Jenna, my business partner, has done, I mean, such a phenomenal job. She's a personal trainer and part of the community, and I remember her coming and saying, you know, transgender people can't work out in binders because it can really adversely affect their physical health. You know, it can break ribs. And she said, I want to do something. I want to create a space where, and I'm not saying that other gyms aren't suitable. I'm absolutely not saying that. But again, it goes back to kind of the idea that people may have and the nerves that they may get walking into a kind of mainstream place. I want to create a space where there's no mirrors. So, you know, nobody will see themselves and kind of have the feelings of dysphoria or anything like that. And a bright, friendly place where they can work out with a qualified personal trainer and really focus on their physical health as well as their mental health. And, you know, she's helped people who are looking to transition in the future, but obviously we know that can be a very long journey for people. And they often have areas of their body that they're not happy with. So we recently had somebody come in who wanted to feel more mask and said, really, so Jenna was working on his shoulders and arms and how to build up her body strength. So it's really about identifying where we can help these people now. And in doing that with their physical health, the mental health improves tenfold.
Absolutely. Just for listeners who might not be, savvy on this, when you say look more masked, you mean look more masculine?
Look more masculine, yeah. Sorry, I should have been clearer on that. Look more masculine. So this particular person is in their transition journey from female to male. And obviously it can take some time for the full transition to take place. And that can be a distressing journey on its own because of the wait lists and things that we have. So we want to make sure, again, that we're putting things in place or trying to help people now when they're going through this and when they're waiting.
Yeah. So as a cisgender person myself, it's really hard for me to imagine what that process, that long process must feel like. But it must be amazing for people who are nearby who can have this, gender affirming and affirming, but also what's the right phrase here? Yeah, gender affirming personal training support. And we all know that physical health, if you're able to do a bit of exercise, that will improve your physical health, but your mental health will also benefit from that too.
Absolutely. And the programme that we've got at the moment, it is free sessions as well. So it's removing the kind of economic barriers that some people might face, so people can get up to kind of 8 weeks a personal fitness programme put in place for them. And a lot of people have then went on to perhaps get a personal trainer or, start running around the local park, buy weights for in the house, and have really continued their fitness journey as well. So it's been lovely to see the kind of outcome of that. And I think, what we're trying to do at the Hive, because we know that, I personally know when I'm giving therapy that there will be a natural end to that. But we want to create a legacy where we're giving people almost like a mental health toolkit that they can take away and use for a long, long time to come. And with peer support at the same time, when you're sitting with somebody who's got lived experience of what you're going through, the power of that is unbelievable. And that's really what we're hoping for, that we can create almost like mental health ambassadors within the LGBTQIA community, where they can share these tips and hints with their friends, so that we're spreading the word out there and we're teaching people, we're sharing best practice as to how we can kind of adapt to different situations and use these techniques to reduce our anxiety. If we're feeling low mood, what worked for one person, what worked for you, right, this worked for me, and really creating, like that word again, a community.
That peer support, it's invaluable, and it's come up quite a few times through this series of podcasts and a couple of times in this episode so far itself. But I guess, if you're someone who doesn't see very many people that represent you or have gone through a similar background to you on the TV, in the media or whatever, then I guess being in a room with someone that you can identify with, and that must be a beautiful thing for your mental health.
Like I said, I'm a qualified therapist, and there is absolutely a place for that. But more recently, I've seen the power of peer support. And I know it myself. I think, even in some sessions, I can kind of veer down that route if I feel as though it's appropriate, because, I've had my own battles with mental health over the years, massively so, and it was peer support that got me through it. If you are sitting across from somebody who can tell you how you're feeling from lived experience and that they've got through it, what better is that to give you hope when you can see it in front of yourself? There's evidence right there to show you that you can get through this. And I just think that it's so powerful. And such a beautiful thing, like you said, when you witness it and somebody says to me, you know, oh, I didn't realise I was, somebody else had felt like that, you know. And it's like a weight's been lifted off them. And I'll reiterate, there is absolutely a place for kind of therapy and psychology and all this when it's necessary. But when it's kind of circumstantial and you need somebody to relate to, there is nothing more powerful than peer support, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you on that. I sent you a script of questions and I've largely abandoned it for the most part, but I'll try and bring it back in line. So earlier on we were talking about discrimination, the stigmas that people face. And I mean, do you think things have improved in terms of stigma and discrimination across the board?
It's a tough question because there's, yes, would be part of my answer. In a lot of ways, things have improved. I don't just focus on locally, but certainly locally in our area, things have massively improved. And when I say that, I mean kind of Scotland and what's going on here. A lot of the youths that come in, and we were talking about the kind of dark side of the internet, they're actually really concerned with what's going on in other places, and we probably all know where we're talking about. But I try and bring their focus back to where they are and what's going on. But I think we still have a long way to go. Schools, I think, in my opinion, are doing their very best. But there is too often that I hear children not going into school because somebody's wrote a letter to excuse them from PE, for example, and that person's not handed over the letter to the other person. So when they go in, they're then told, no, you have to do PE, and that then sets them back, and they just don't want to have to deal with that kind of thing. So I know that there's staff shortages. I know they're doing an absolutely fantastic job on the most part, but there are still gaps there. The Hive itself, we were subject to a bit of hate crime in the early days, and again it was some youths that had come down and targeted the place. We were a new space, and they were just being disrespectful, using disrespectful language. Thankfully that's been sorted out. The local police were fantastic. But again, yeah, it is still happening. It is still out there. I had a very good friend of mine who is currently moved now to another area in Fife, was brutally beaten up by their neighbour for being transgender. So it's, in a lot of ways, yes, we have moved on, but we're not fully there. We're nowhere near it.
What often... That's a horrible thing to happen to your friend, and I quite often hear some of the transphobic discourse, and it's not even discourse is dignifying it in a way that it maybe doesn't deserve to be, but you don't often hear about that kind of story, and I hear about things maybe through social media quite often about people being assaulted, or I mean, what was that trans girl that was murdered last year? Brianna Gray, was that her surname? That was a big story, as it should have been. But trans people are being assaulted all the time, it seems, and you don't often hear that side of things. And you hear about the quote unquote moral dilemma of trans people. I've read a book a couple of years ago called The Trans Issue by Sean Fay, and she talks about how the impact on health for trans people is often ignored in these debates, and it's often about sex defined places, that sort of thing, but they don't include that side of things. People are being subjected to all sorts of horrors just for being trans. Absolutely.
And I think it's the Brianna situation obviously was harrowing. What was lovely at the time and to come out of an awful situation, we had a vigil at the Hive, and so many people came along, and not just from the transgender community, from the straight community as well, and lit a candle. But you're right, you don't hear about it enough. And do you know, I'll kind of turn it round a bit as well, because I often speak to clients about it, about not always looking at the kind of doom and gloom side of things, because although we do have a long way to go, I talk to them about looking at stories of joy and looking at stories of success and happiness as well. You know, when Pride comes along, there's not a better day in our diary in Kirkcaldy, and I know it's one day, but it's a celebration of who we are and being our authentic self. It's the stories that happen every day in the hive that you don't hear of somebody saying, you know, I got my first job, I had the guts to go back to school, I've made 3 new friends. These are success stories. These are massively as important to focus on the kind of positive. And I think we need that a lot of the time at the moment as well, because there is so much in the media and in the news of negativity, and that's not ignoring it and saying that we don't need to tackle that, but it's also putting a focus on the things that we're getting right and the support that's out there, and the wonderful people who are educating themselves and want to be there. You know, it's incredible the amount of support that we've had, and we feel very, very lucky to. I don't know much about other councils, I'm sure they're fantastic as well, but Fife Council in particular have been brilliant with us in terms of helping and supporting us in our journey. And yeah, it's lovely when you see, we have a youth group once a fortnight on a Friday, and it's lovely when you see these shy youngsters coming in, and they're all kind of sitting at different areas of the hive, kind of looking about, thinking, and you can see some of them looking at the door thinking, I'm out of here in the next 5 minutes. And then you kind of bring them together, and you'll maybe know that a couple of them have got common grounds, and you'll say something. Have you been reading that Heartstopper book? Because I think they read that Heartstopper. And you see the kind of the progression of the friendship in front of your eyes, and the magic that has, that they come in on a Friday. I'm getting goosebumps when I'm talking about it. They come in on a Friday and they're running around, and, you know, they're doing artwork, and they're comparing stories about their week, and just doing what they should always be doing. And it's just invaluable. Yeah, it's so invaluable. I can't emphasise it enough. And, you know, we've got a team of volunteers at the Hive who work tirelessly and give their time to the community, and I'm so grateful for them, because we just couldn't do it without them. We're open 6 days a week. And it can sometimes be really long days, and you can be dealing with a lot of different things throughout that day as well. So we're incredibly lucky with the team that we've got, incredibly lucky with the community that we've got, and yeah, I'm just hoping that we can keep going, get more services, help more people, and focus on removing any barriers that the community has to accessing what they require, and supporting everybody.
That's lovely. Yeah, and best of luck with you to you
Thank
for
you.
that. Okay, so I feel like we've quite rightfully spent quite a bit of time talking about of the LGBTQIA plus acronym. We've spent quite a lot of time focusing on the transgender community. What about the other parts of that umbrella, if you like? What sort of stigma or discrimination do they face, and what reason is there to be hopeful for them?
I think we've came a long way in terms of lesbian, gay, and bisexual. The acronym obviously includes queer or questioning, intersex, and asexual. And I've actually seen a rise in people identifying as asexual, and I'm sure everybody knows, but for those who don't, it means that people don't have a sexual attraction towards somebody else. So I think it's really important that we give a little bit of time to those acronyms as well. I think the original, you go back in history, and it was the lesbian and gay kind of movement that really started it all off. So we've got a lot to kind of thank people for, who stood up and came out. They had a very, very difficult journey, but I think that they really paved the way for a lot of the other acronyms and sexual identities to come forward. So yeah, I think we've made a lot of way in that. I know we've focused quite particularly on the transgender community. I think because it's so prevalent at the moment in the media and on social media and things, we've not forgetting the lesbian, gay, bisexual, questioning or queer, intersex and asexual as well, because they do face discrimination and hardships just like everybody else. And I think a lot of them are along the same lines of the transgender community. You know, it's the fear of kind of going into a place and having to almost explain yourself and face anybody that may be discriminatory. Is it going to be a kind of a form that you're going to have to fill in, that you're going to have to give your sexual orientation? Do you want to do that? Have you had a previously bad experience with an organisation, which can obviously make you more reluctant to go down mainstream avenues? So I think we do have a lot of people that come in who do identify under the whole umbrella of the LGBTQIA+, and we make sure that we're not just focused on any one group. It has to be a place for everybody. So there has to be the advocacy for everybody, the services available for everybody. We've got a lot of different people that come in from the gay community who we do free sexual health checks. And we have a lot of the gay community come in and get a sexual health check regularly. They get the results within 15 minutes. And it means, again, that they're in a kind of safe and affirmative place when they're doing that. So they're comfortable to do so, rather than maybe feeling a bit nervous about going down to a local clinic or speaking to their GP about it. They get that opportunity to do it privately within the hive.
Among people who will get it, who will
Absolutely.
probably have a similar life experience.
A similar life experience, and it all goes back to that kind of relatability and being comfortable. So yeah, although, like I said, the transgender community seem to be, widely publicised at the moment, we are absolutely not forgetting about the rest of our community, because they go through exactly the same difficulties. And I find that they've been an absolutely fantastic support to the transgender community as well, because there is a relatability factor of how difficult they found it. And there are some people who are still, scared to come out as lesbian, gay, bisexual, intersex, asexual. There is still that stigma in areas around those sexualities as well.
As someone who isn't gay, I guess I find it quite hard to I don't really see much homophobia in my real life, so I like to, I guess, trick myself sometimes into believing, well, that's us. It's not like when I was at school when the word gay was quite a pejorative word, and I've not heard anyone use it that way in a long time, and I'm sure if you did in most circles, you would get rightfully challenged for it. But it's not all rainbows and sunshine from what I gather and from what I read sometimes as well.
Absolutely not. There's still challenges faced. There are people who have grown up and just do not agree with somebody being gay or lesbian or bisexual, and it's been probably a learned behaviour through generation, and they don't want to change, and people are tormented. The slurs that they have to put up with is absolutely disgusting. If I've known some gay people that have come into the hive and said, if I'm in a bar and you can still hear a group of people calling their friends, different derogatory words, and they think it's a laugh and a joke. Now, I'm sure these people, if they knew how offensive and how intimidating that could be, they would maybe think twice. But these are the challenges that we have to face all the time. People are using our identities as an insult. Now, that, when you think about that, you think that's absolutely heinous, to actually throw around the way somebody identifies as an insult for somebody else or as a joke. And these are things that people won't hear often about. Now, if you were to perhaps, feel as though you were going to make a complaint about somebody, and you were to go, well, they called me a name. Are you going to think, well, that's going to be taken really seriously? And a lot of the time they'll think, no, it's not. There's no point in saying, I feel uncomfortable going into the office because I'm hearing X, Y, Z, or I'm hearing slurs. And they might stop if they know that there's somebody who identifies that way. But why should the LGBTQIA plus community have to announce themselves?
To come out every time.
Every single time they want to say to people, just educate yourself. Don't be ignorant. Don't brand these comments around as if they're jokes or insults, because they're not. It's people's lives.
Yeah, the thing, when you say something as a joke, especially if you use it as an excuse to say that it's not actually offensive, it's, that phrase, ne'er a true word said in jest. And it's
absolutely.
Like, you can try and use that as an excuse if you want, but a lot of people won't do it. But I guess what that also highlights is that the precariousness of this acceptance, and there's an I think it, again, from my perspective, and who knows, I don't necessarily have the authority to say if this is real life, but maybe, gay people can adopt children now and they can get married, and that wasn't a thing when I was younger. Where was I going with this? I had a thought there, and I was like, I need to provide an example.
You'll think of it again.
Yeah, but as we turn all the stuff off, I'll be like, that's what I was going to say.
But yeah, I mean, you're right in terms of, why should we have to kind of announce ourselves? To me, there's a youth that comes into the Hive regularly that has a difficult time at home because they're not fully accepted as who they want to be, and they identify as gay, and sometimes they have been asked the question of this is or they've been told this is a phase, it's attention seeking, it's not real, grow up. Do you really want that for your life? There's a massive things that, the LGBTQIA plus community live the same lives as everybody else, in terms of we wake up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we get ready, we go out about our day, we go to work, see our families, whatever. It doesn't mean that you're doomed for this kind of incredibly difficult life. We're trying to educate people so that there are less challenges. But, I think people have an idea, certainly some people have an idea that if your child comes out as part of the community, they're going to have a heinous time. And I want to kind of address that, because that's not the case. Yes, we talk about the struggles that we have, but there are also places like the Hive. There are also fantastic people in the world who accept absolutely everybody. Our community is growing all the time. And, the support is out there. It doesn't mean that just because somebody identifies as LGBTQIA+, that you're inherently going to have mental health problems. The mental health problems normally comes from the lack of acceptance in society, the barriers that are put up to accessing services, the difficulties in that respect. You're not born gay and then, boom, you've got depression or you've got anxiety. It's circumstantial.
Yeah, of course. The statistics for suicides in Scotland for 2023 were published back in August 24, as you probably know, and the kind of number of people who fell under the umbrella, so to speak, were quite high. And like you say, it's not because they are gay or lesbian or bi or queer. It's the way they're treated. Absolutely.
And I think, and apologies to go back to the transgender community again, but particularly because they have such a struggle being in a body that they shouldn't be in, and they're living that every single day. And then on top of that, you've got the kind of wait lists for gender clinics, for hormones, the age restrictions. So they themselves are, I'm pretty sure that the statistics was that over half of transgender people had said that they'd attempted to take their own life. Now, not being transgender myself, I can't imagine how it must feel walking about in the wrong body.
And like you say, you can't hide from it. I suppose, it's hard to imagine what that'd be like.
You see yourself every day, and how people see you as well. And I think that's a big thing. I've spoken to a lot of the transgender community, and there's been vast amounts of positive stories. But there's a lot of particularly young people who have maybe just gone through their transition or in their transition journey, who you can say to them as much as you like, you look absolutely fantastic, and they'll say things like, but I've got, my jawline isn't how it should be, and my cheekbones aren't as high, or for somebody who's transitioning female to male, my body's still too feminine. These are things that we can never understand, and it must be such a challenge. So, I have the utmost respect for people who are going through that journey. And I just hope that they can make some inroads into kind of wait times and things for gender clinics. Because I think that there'll be a lot of life saved by that.
It seems to be a bit of and this is me just getting my soapbox now, it's a bit of a thing for politicians to use, and there's that, is it the Tavistock Centre down in England that got closed, and all sorts of mean things. But personally, I feel quite strongly that trans people do get bullied.
Yeah.
And I could go on about this for a long time. But
we've got, just before we go, we have I know a trans woman that comes into the Hive, and I just wanted to give her a wee plug because she has written a book, and it's called Molly, and the M is in brackets, and it is a really wonderful read. It's by Ailey Chambers, and it's available kind of on Amazon and things. And I really think that anybody out there looking to kind of enjoy and really learn should pick up that book, because it's about the journey of somebody who is obviously transgender, written by somebody who is transgender. And I think that if you're looking for something to read, then Molly's a really good starting point.
Coming up to the end, I feel like we probably could talk about a lot of these topics for quite a long period of time.
Forever.
Absolutely. But to bring it to the end, we have to end it at some point, I suppose. So I guess my second last question to you is, what would you say to someone who's listening to this podcast and maybe doesn't have the Hive or a Love and Harmony on their doorstep? What would you say to someone listening to this who is facing challenges, be it to their mental health or stigma and discrimination because of their sexuality or gender identity?
First thing I would say is, I'm proud of you. You're not alone. It may feel like that at the moment. It can be very difficult if you're in a kind of rural community or a community that doesn't have a place like the Hive or out with a big city. And I know how frightening it can be. I know how harrowing it can be, having to come out and having to fight to be your authentic self. But you have all of the LGBTQIA plus community and the allies behind you. Reach out. Please reach out. Even if you email an organisation like the Hive, we will put you in touch with somebody in your local area. there is support out there. Just don't forget that you're valued, and yeah, we're all proud of who you are, and we'll continue to fight together for the rights of the LGBTQIA plus community.
Great, thank you. And to anyone listening to this who maybe wants to use your service or find out more, where can people do that?
So you can email thehive@loveandharmony.scot, and we'll get back to you. We've got a number of events on. We've got Fife Pride is the 5th of July this year, and we've got Claire Sweeney coming back up again from down south as the kind of main guest. But the focus of Hive is really to celebrate who we are. We've got a lot of different events on. We've got our Facebook page as well, so you can check us out there. And we welcome absolutely everybody into the Hive. There's something for everyone. We are a family. Come and be part of it.
Lovely. Thank you. Lindsey, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
And, you've made your way down to number 18 Farmland Road to speak to us, which I'm really grateful for. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.